some Salvation Army officer who probably didn't skateboard said, hey, I'm seeing a lot of people around my neighborhood skateboarding. Let's go ahead and build these ramps and see what happens. And now we have generations of people who came to know Jesus because somebody thought, hey, this might be a good opportunity to expand our ministry a little bit. And I think it certainly was.
Welcome to the Daron Earlewine podcast, where we awaken you to become who you were born to be. Here's your host, Daron Earlewine.
Can skateboarding change your life? That's the question of the week. It's a big one. I mean, we've all wanted to be a skater at some point in our life. The question is, did we miss that window that could have changed our life if we had taken up skating? I know we probably at least missed one of those cool haircuts where, the under part was shaved and you know what I'm saying? Oh, laugh track right off the bat today. Welcome back. It's episode 6 of the Daron Earlewine podcast, and I want to welcome you to the journey of awakening to become who you were born to be. And it's my honor and joy to be with you each and every week here on the podcast. Thanks for tuning in, whether it's here on YouTube or through any of the audio platforms, and you're listening to the podcast today. Please like and subscribe. Leave us a review, if you will. Definitely helps us grow the community and the impact of the podcast. And if you want to get more connected, just go ahead and search Daron Earlewine on Facebook or Instagram and give me a like or a follow there, and we'll stay a little more connected. Welcome back to episode 6. This week, I'm going to hit you with some content here up top, and then we're sitting down with Vinyl Lee, who possibly has the coolest name of anyone we've had on the podcast yet. When I saw his name, I thought, I think his first name is Vinyl, but I'm like, I've never heard of anybody with the first name Vinyl. But I instantaneously regretted all of my kids' name choices, that none of my sons are named Vinyl, because if that's not a name for a rock star, I don't know what is. If any of my kids become rock stars, I'm going to tell them, think about changing your name to Vinyl. But Vinyl is an officer in the Salvation Army, not a rock star, but his story is rock and roll worthy. We're going to talk about how actually at 13 years old, his love for skateboarding actually changed his life and his eternity. And it's going to be a great interview. I'm excited for you guys to hear that. And I just want to thank everybody for listening, downloading the podcast, sharing it with friends. We're seeing the numbers each and every week increase, subscriptions going up, and it just means a lot. We broke the 200 barrier this week on YouTube. I want to thank you if you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just made my heart go pitter-pat, and I really appreciate it for the momentum and joining us and being part of the community. And speaking of that, a couple of weeks ago, I asked for you guys to leave us some reviews on various podcast platforms, and we're going to choose at random somebody to get one of these cool Daron Earlewine coffee mugs, which make any beverage you drink in them taste better. 10%. Isn't that what, Coop, isn't that what they said, 10% better?
I'm hearing 10%.
10%. Could be 12. 10 to 12% better taste by drinking out of one of these coffee mugs. And let's go to some of the reviews. I want to give some shout outs here, just the mailbag, if you will. Check it in. Let's see. Here's one of the first ones. This was a cool one from Michelle in Monroe, Georgia, down there in Georgia in the South. Thanks for the review, Michelle. She says, I really have no words for how much the podcast episodes with Julie and Davey meant to me. Absolutely God ordained for me to move toward my healing. At 54 years old, I look forward to be identified with my healing and not my pain. Thank you, Daron. I was made on purpose and for a purpose. Thanks, Michelle, for the review. Heartfelt review there, and heartfelt gratitude from me. I'm excited about your journey, and you don't go into detail what your pain is, but God is going to use that journey to bring great purpose and meaning. And thanks so much for joining us on the podcast, Michelle from Monroe, Georgia. And let's see, here's another one from Ryan. Ryan from here in Indiana. Ryan says that we use the painful realities of life as a jumping off point to encourage and edify our listeners. And we give you practical steps to take and the ways to change your mindset to help you better in your family, your career, and your ministry. Ryan, thanks for the review. We appreciate it. That means a lot. This one's cool here, and this is from a friend, a long time listener and alumni from Spiritual DNA, Michelle, here in Indianapolis. And she says, I've been a Daron Earlewine fan for coming up on 2 years now, coincides with my move to Indy. She says she loves the Spiritual DNA course, and she combined that with coaching that we offer. She went through coaching with us, and it's been absolutely life-changing. So she says, way back in the day, the Born to Be podcast, Radio Theology, some of our first podcasting efforts she was a part of. And then she says the ebook, God is Near, have really been life-changing. And Michelle, this means so much for the encouragement. She says she's so excited for this new venture and to be listening to this podcast from the get-go. And then she adds in holy guacamole, which, I mean, if you can add holy guacamole in a thing, it's definitely something positive. She says, if you haven't listened to the conversation with Davey Blackburn and his wife, Julie, make it a priority. And I agree. Both those episodes were so great. And Michelle, thanks for the review. I really appreciate it. But we had to go at random here. And we have one more review that came through, and we said one of the first 5, and I'm just going to choose the 5th one on the page here, and it is Drew. Drew, who is, let's see if it says here where Drew's from. It doesn't. We'll have to get Drew's address. But Drew, your review is going to get chosen. We're going to send you one of the cool Daron Earlewine mugs, and I appreciate that so much. Your review says that we bring a mixture of humor and knowledge to take us on a journey to connect the dots for our purpose. Great host, great guest. The sound effects complete the audio brilliance. Oh, just for that. I mean, the sound effects right there. We love the buttons of all the sound effects. They make it happen. I mean, for instance, if I were to say something awkward and no one commented, I would just hit this one right here. Crickets. You didn't know how meaningful and helpful a cricket sound effect would be. Now you do. Anyway, guys, thanks for the reviews. I appreciate it. Keep them coming on any of the podcast channels, whether it be audio or on YouTube as well. We thank you so much for the growth of the podcast, and we do it for you, and we appreciate hearing from you. So thank you so much. Hey, we talk a lot about the Spiritual DNA online course and live workshops because the purpose of this podcast is to help awaken you to become who you were born to be. And Spiritual DNA is a course I put together over the past 15, 20 years that I used to really discover who God had created me to be. And I thought, you know what, I'm not going to keep this just to myself. I want this to be something that blesses and awakens thousands of people because of the life change it made in my life. And so we talk a lot about the Spiritual DNA course. You can check that out over at spiritualdna.me is where you can get the course. But one of the most asked questions we have every single time we do Spiritual DNA, specifically when we do a live workshop, and we have people there, and we're kind of going through a workshop of the day. We have small group discussions and table leaders at these live workshops. Is one of the greatest, most asked questions we get time and year after year when people go through Spiritual DNA is this question: what's next? Like, what now? I've had this experience. I've discovered things that are true about myself that I didn't realize. I understand the unique way that God has put me together. I understand how I connect with God. I understand my role to play in his kingdom. I understand the strengths that God has given me. I see how God can actually take my personality and use that to help to lead me to a process of seeing the pain in my life be redeemed and reformed to be a place of passion. I have all this knowledge, but what is next? It's a great question. I want to give you just a quick 3-part answer to what's next after you discover your DNA. And if you've not gone through Spiritual DNA yet, no problem. These will still apply to your life because you may be at a place right now where you've come to some kind of new awakening, some kind of new discovery or desire to begin moving to greater purpose and meaning in your life. And you go, where do I start? Like, what is step 1? Great question, and I'm going to hit you with the answers. And these 3 points I want to give you guys today before we get into the interview with Vinyl, you're going to see that they actually are lived out in Vinyl's story. And as I listened through his interview and kind of reviewed upon it for this podcast, I saw this kind of jumping out at me, and I thought, you know what, this could be a great way to set up Vinyl's interview as well as a way to give you a couple takeaways if you're asking yourself what is next. And here it is. Here's the first. There's 3 words, actually, and they all alliterate with the letter D, because why not alliterate things when you can? But they're this: delight, decide, and dedicate. So if you're taking notes right now on the Stairmaster, just stop for a minute. Don't fall off. Write these down. We'll put them in the show notes as well. But they are, right? Delight, decide, and dedicate. Here's the first one. You got to delight yourself in the Lord. You want to know what's next. You want to know what the next step after spiritual DNA is. You want to know what your first step is if you want to begin moving towards becoming who God's created you to be, whether you've taken DNA or not. The first step is this: delight yourself in the Lord. Psalm 37 tells us this: to delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Now, a lot of times people see this scripture, or they read this scripture and think, oh, that means that if I just go to church a bunch, then God will give me the Cadillac that I want. That is not what the scripture is saying. This is saying that as you grow in a relationship of trust with God and you begin to delight yourself, take joy, right, and identity from that relationship, what will begin to happen is as you enter a covenant relationship with God, the word covenant means becoming one, you and God will begin to share heart's desires. You will be put on a path that agrees with the mind and the heart of God. And in that process, you will be in concert with him and learn to trust him, and that will form and shape your desires. And therefore, you'll see yourself gathering and enjoying the desires of your heart. The word delight there, did a little research on it. I love this, and I hadn't heard this before, and it brought a whole different picture to what this means, and this first step being to delight yourself in the Lord. And it's this: the word delight literally means to be soft or tender. To be soft or tender. So be soft or tender in the Lord. And when I hear that, when I think about that, here's what came to me, is this idea of learning to trust God. If you think about your posture, your attitude, your defense mechanisms, imagine being with someone right now that you do not trust. Think for a minute. I mean, if you can, just think somebody in your mind right now, in your life, that you absolutely do not trust. They've wronged you, they've hurt you, whatever it may be. Think about your posture, your attitudes, your reactions when you're around someone you absolutely do not trust. Would the term or the words soft or tender ever be used in that context with someone that you absolutely don't trust? I'm going to guess no. In fact, I'm going to guarantee it. We are not soft and tender around people we don't trust. We are strong, right? We are hardened. We are defensive. If I don't trust you, I'm not soft and tender around you. I'm not going to delight in your presence. I'm not going to delight in your wisdom. I'm not going to delight in your perspective. I'm going to actually be decidedly against what it is because I do not trust you. And as we grow in our understanding and try to figure out what is next in becoming who God has created me to be, I have to delight myself in the Lord in this relationship. And forever, I tell the story in Spiritual DNA, and you've probably heard it before if you've listened to the podcast, but it's my story, so I don't try to repeat it, but it's the only story I have. But I remember as a kid majorly struggling with trusting God with the good stuff in my life. Is I was convinced if I did the Jesus thing and I did what God wanted me to be, that I was going to die in some Papua New Guinea hut somewhere in Papua New Guinea, which I'm not even sure. Coop, do we know where Papua New Guinea is? It's not Africa. It's over there somewhere. It's a place. I did graduate from college. At some point, I probably had to know the capital of Papua New Guinea or something. I don't know. It's over there. I just remember we had some missionaries come through from Papua New Guinea. And for whatever reason, the missionaries always had snakes they'd killed, like a big snake skin. And they smelled weird, and they had slideshows. And in your brain, you're thinking, who are the all-stars? Like, who are the Hall of Fame Christians? Well, they're missionaries. That's what you grow up thinking. And so the thought was, if you really go all out for Jesus, he's going to make you a missionary. Missionaries are weird. They smell weird, and they kill snakes outside of their huts. And I hate snakes. I was very terrified of them. So the thought was, if I trust God with the next steps in my life, I'm going to be killed by snakes in Papua New Guinea or Africa, somewhere else. And I didn't want to do any of those things. And so as a kid, I remember majorly I mean, not delighting myself in the Lord, but being scared. I wasn't soft and tender towards him. I was defensive and scared of him because I knew the things that I really wanted to be a part of. And that's this next side, the part, right? We got to delight ourselves in the Lord, but then we got to decide to trust ourselves. In the struggle and the fight that I had as a kid was I wanted to learn to delight myself in the Lord, but I didn't know how to decide to trust myself. Is because since I was 9 years old, all I wanted to do was play drums. And like, I say that a lot and tell the stories like in third grade, and I listened to this Stryper album and I was like, just fell in love with drumming. And I was like, I have to be Robert Sweet from Stryper. That's my life's calling. And now I have kids. I've had a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 10-year-old. And right now my 10-year-old, he's in fourth grade. And I think about that I was actually younger than him when God captured my heart for drumming. And I thought in my brain, I feel like I was older than that because I look at him now. I'm like, dude, you're not very old. And I wasn't very old. But from that point, there was a tuning fork in my soul that went off that said, I need to be a drummer. And what happened was this idea of deciding to trust that God had put that in my life, in the ability to delight myself or be soft and tender and trust God. I felt like they were at odds. Is that this great desire and passion to play drums, no way that could be from God, because God takes people and he's mean to them and he's a bad dad and he just wants to send them to Africa or Papua New Guinea so they could die. I know this sounds ridiculous what I'm saying, but I'm telling you as a kid, this was absolutely what I thought. And yours may not be as extreme. You may not be, it may not be snakes in Papua New Guinea, but my guess is that you have had points in your life, if you're not at one right now, where you find yourself at a tug of war of things you think maybe God is nudging you to do, that you struggle to believe that if you do, he's not going to screw your life up, and then the stuff that you really want to do. I mean, I think about us and a couple of weeks ago here on the podcast, we shared the story of Laura, who's about to go to Haiti for 6 months. And she has this desire to help less fortunate people and come around hurting women and this but then at the same time, she's like, oh, I don't know if I can trust that because what will people think? And maybe God's just out to get me. And she's walked in this process of delighting herself in the Lord, being soft and tender towards him, learning to trust him, and then deciding, right, to trust herself in who God had made her to be. That's the power of understanding as you go through spiritual DNA, is realizing, listen, I make sense. Like the gifts that I have, the desires that I have, the burdens that I have, the personality that I have, I actually make sense. I remember sitting across the table from a 17-year-old high school student a couple years ago. We were taking a group of about 13 kids through spiritual DNA. And this young woman, she was 17, brilliant. She had a heart and a passion for justice and to stand for the oppressed and those that didn't have a voice. And in her mind, she always had this desire. She wanted to be a lawyer, but she thought that was a kind of a crazy idea. And no one in her family had been a lawyer. Could she really be a lawyer? Is she smart enough to be a lawyer? Did she really want to be a lawyer to help people, or was she just wanting to do a career that would make money? She struggled to trust herself and to trust God. We go through spiritual DNA, and she comes through and realizes from her spiritual pathways to the fact that God had made her a prophetic teacher, like a prophetic, a creative guardian. Like her role on earth was custom made to actually move into this. So she went and looked at her strengths. She had strengths that set her up that she would for sure be a successful and effective lawyer. And there's this moment that in the eyes of a 17-year-old, for the first time in her life, realizing I make sense. That I can delight myself in the Lord and I can decide to trust myself and who he's created me to be. And it was amazing to step into that moment. And I think about Jordan Lee Dooley, Christian author. We've had her on the podcast before. Jordan talks about from a young age, she was writing short stories. She was writing stories and trying to communicate with people. And now she's an author, and she's got this Etsy store where she writes these stories and does this different art. She's an author. She's a speaker. This was put in her, right? From the beginning. Let's understand that we talk about DNA, that you have everything you need for life and godliness already put in you, right? 2 Peter chapter 1 tells us that. Think about Abby Shank that we've had on the podcast here recently. She's written and published 2 books by the age of 17. And she has been writing her whole life. God put that in her. She had to come to the place where she decided to trust herself of who God's created her to be, of the things that are most passionate within her, and go after them. Here's the thought. Here's what I want you to know. Is many times the greatest desire in your heart are actually your compass for calling. If you're trying to figure out what's next, what's my next step, the greatest desires of your heart that are in line with your trust in God, in who he is, that is your compass for calling. Because I think about my life and I think about the stories I've just shared, is if I don't trust myself and pursue my passion for drumming, my life is not what it has become. God used my desire and my passion and my talent for drumming as I pursued that to give me every opportunity that I've been given right now in my life comes back to the decision to trust myself in that desire, that compass of calling to pursue one of my greatest passions. And for you, it might not be drumming. It might not be writing. I don't know what it is for you, but I want to encourage you to delight yourself in the Lord and then decide to trust yourself in the greatest longings and the greatest passions that you have to pursue. God put them there for a reason, and he's created you on purpose to actually be able to fulfill them. The last thing is this: dedicate yourself to serving others. Delight yourself in the Lord, decide to trust yourself, and then dedicate yourself to serve others. I believe that you're made on purpose and for a purpose, and part of that purpose is shaped by the fact that you're made in the image of God, meaning that you are made and created to experience the greatest fulfillment in passion and joy in life as you serve others. Jesus is the greatest servant the world has ever seen, and you are created in his image to be a servant. And as we're going to dive into this interview with Vinyl, he has given his life to serve others. And the stories are inspirational. The life change of the people that he's seeing around his life, that's the gold of life. And no matter what you do, no matter what career you have, you cannot extract enough meaning and value and worth out of living for yourself. Vanity can only get you so far, and you will find it empty, because that's not what you were created for. You were not created for your own enjoyment and glory and purpose and benefit. The fulfillment in the fullness of who God's created you to be is only found as you dedicate yourself to serve others. You're going to see that in the story here of Vinyl Lee. And I want to leave you with this quote. I guess it's a story. Many years ago, I was sitting down with kind of a distant mentor of mine, a guy named Daron Campbell. And Daron's a great entrepreneurial leader. And I was telling Daron about some ideas that I had and that things I wanted to pursue and things I was passionate about. But I was, again, at another crossroads where I'm like, man, I don't know if I can trust God with this. I don't know, can I trust myself in this? And Daron said, Daron, a bunch of Darons. He said, Daron, I want you to remember these three things. And I've shared this with you guys before in past podcasts, but it was so shaping for me. But Daron said this. He goes, I want you to remember this. If you're excited about doing something for God and for others, he said, God is 10 times more excited about it than you are. And that was a game changer for me, because like I said, I've always struggled to trust God. And if I have a thought of something that I want to go after, in my brain, I still struggle to think that maybe God's against it, or he's going to try to screw it up somehow, or he's like, he'll kind of allow me to do it, but he's not really excited about it. Like, I suppose this time you can, but only because I'm feeling nice. And to come to the place to go, if there's something that I'm excited that is in line with God's word and God's heart and it serves other people, God is 10 times more excited about me doing it than I am. Daron said, number 2, I want you to remember this, is that God will always stack the deck in your favor. God has already stacked the deck in your favor. As you discover who you were created to be and you begin to leverage those strengths and abilities, you're already 10 times ahead of the game because you're moving in the lane in which God's created you. But time and time again, I've seen this over and over and over again. Things that there's two choices. There are random, amazing coincidences, or God is moving the universe to actually align in your favor. He's stacking the deck in your favor, and he begins to move and set you up for success. Because here's another biblical truth, right? The reality is this, is that he's created you, right, in Christ Jesus to do good works, which he's prepared in advance for you to do. So you're already stepping into these things. The deck is stacked in your favor. The last thing is this, is to remember it's not about you. That's where that dedication to serving others comes in. It's not about you. It's about how God has equipped you to walk and to serve and to love others. That's the story of Vinyl Lee. We're going to jump into it now. I know you're going to enjoy it. I know I have enjoyed recording it, listening to it, and we're going to jump in right now to our interview with Vinyl Lee. I just love the name again. I mean, Vinyl Lee, I feel like I'm announcing somebody coming on stage. And now, taking the stage, Vinyl Lee. He's an officer in the Salvation Army. He's not collecting money for Christmas, but he does tell a story about how skateboarding changed his life. Let's jump in our interview right now with Vinyl Lee. Very excited to be with Vinyl Lee, an officer from the Salvation Army here in Indianapolis. And Vinyl, you guys are doing some amazing stuff around the city that I want to hear about. And we're just excited to partner with you and with Thrivent Financial as well with what's going on with ActivateIndy.com. Just really helping mobilize people to get involved and making a difference in our city through serving. And stoked to have you on the podcast today, Vinyl.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here for sure.
Yeah, we had. I'd said when we first jumped on the call that I think you definitely win the award with the coolest first name of anybody I've ever interviewed or met in my life.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's I definitely have enjoyed having the name. It's a cool name for sure.
How did your parents come up with the name Vinyl?
Yeah, so it's actually a family name. So my full name is Vinyl Leroy Lee III. So it was my grandfather's name, then it was my father's name, and now it is my name. So 3 generations of really cool names.
I love it. Yeah, your dad and your grandpa must be pretty cool guys. You can't have a name like Vinyl and be like, not cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can attest for my father. I unfortunately never had I was just gonna say I never had a chance to actually meet my grandfather, so I don't know if he was cool or not. But I imagine with the name Vinyl, he had to have been.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Vinyl, tell us a little bit about you're an officer in the Salvation Army, and I want us to get maybe just a little education there because there might be people that are like, they see the Salvation Army bell ringers, at Christmas or whatever, and they may drive past one, but they maybe have really no idea what it means that you're an officer with the Salvation Army or what it is that you guys are actually, commissioned to do. So give us a little education on both those fronts.
Yeah, absolutely. So an officer in the Salvation Army is, in essence, we are the ordained ministers of what is the Salvation Army Church. So in the 131 countries that the Salvation Army serves, in every single one of those countries, there are officers, and all of those officers are responsible for administering all of the pastoral duties that the Salvation Army oversees. So at the very core of kind of who we are as the Salvation Army is a church, which has, again, Sunday expressions across all of the countries in which we serve. And so an officer is perhaps the Salvation Army's term for pastor or senior pastor. So if someone is familiar with church context at all, they may be a bit more familiar with what it means to be a pastor than perhaps what it would be to be an officer. But as my role, my commissioned role, is to really oversee all of the happenings of the Salvation Army within my command. So me specifically in Fountain Square, I oversee everything that happens within this kind of Fountain Square campus. And that's really the primary hat that an officer would wear in these kind of settings. So it's interesting.
So what are some of the main things that you guys are doing down there in Fountain Square? Like I said, I know people are familiar with some of the more traditional expressions of Salvation Army ministry, but give us a little peek behind the scenes of what you guys are doing down there in Fountain Square ministry. Well,
absolutely. So here in Fountain Square, some of the 3 main things that we try to focus on is our outreach to youth, to adults, and then to older adults. So what you would really experience as you as you came into the building here at Fountain Square is a number of different things. If you showed up on a Wednesday, kind of during the lunch hour, you might see senior bingo happening in the dining room. If you showed up a little bit later in the evening on that same Wednesday, you might see basketball leagues happening in our gymnasium. If you showed up on a different day of the week, you might see youth character building programs, which are programs administered by the Salvation Army to help develop life skills within youth within the neighborhood. And here specifically in Fountain Square, we've taken a STEM focus. We have the privilege of having a maker space here in the facility, equipped with 3D printers and sewing machines, and we're working on sort of expanding what that maker space is. And so really kind of leaning into helping young people here within the Fountain Square community understand, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and really all of that's involved here. And then as we, continue throughout the week, you'd show up on Sunday and you'd experience sort of this contemporary worship service, equipped with music and message. And our big vision here in Fountain Square, and I think that translates across a number of different campuses, is that the Salvation Army would be a place where all people belong, where they could become and then ultimately believe. And so we're passionate about connecting with people in exactly where they're at. And I think here in Fountain Square, given just the nature of this neighborhood, it's a thriving arts and cultural district. It's full of young families. It's full of a diverse population. It's got a great mixture of those who are homeless or housing insecure. And so we get to sort of, as the Salvation Army, sit in that tension of perhaps dueling cultures and find a way where all people can belong here. And so that's really who and what we are here as the Salvation Army in Fountain Square. And so then as we move into Christmas and what people understand as our red kettles, all of those donations are going to support those types of programs. So it's supporting kids learning, how do I computer code? How do I take an idea that's in my head and then 3D model that? Or how do I help teenagers who perhaps are in difficult and broken situations, and how do I connect them into mentorships with adults who look like them and care about them, and want them to be better? And how do I help a senior population within my community? Every time you're donating to the Salvation Army, you're making those types of opportunities possible.
Awesome, Vinyl. Thanks for the overview. That I probably guess I should have known all the things the Salvation Army is involved in, since I am an ordained minister myself. But I think a lot of people, maybe they have a very short-sighted, vision of what the Salvation Army does. And one of the things that I want to dive into your story is we want to get people, involved in what you guys are doing. And get involved serving the community, especially if they're in that Fountain Square area. But one thing we try to do in these Activate Indy interviews is get a little behind the scenes of your life. If they're going to come serve alongside you guys missionally, I think it's important for them to know the heartbeat behind of why you're involved and what you're involved in. And your story is unique, and I'm excited to get into it. And it really highlights something that we talk about in our spiritual DNA course. spiritualdna.me is the website for that. But the connection between people finding passion, a place to serve. And I love that word passion comes from the Latin word passeo, which means suffering. And so there's an interesting connection between pain and passion. And a lot of times I think we separate those two to our own detriment. And your life story has, takes you through a journey, a painful journey through childhood and through moving and kind of changing your whole identity. But then the Salvation Army came in, and there's a place where you found real passion and healing there. And I just kind of want you to unpack that journey for us so we can learn from it.
I live now here in Indianapolis, but have not always lived in Indianapolis, and really have only been in the state of Indiana for the last 5 years or so. And so my story starts further out east, where was born, and we sort of kind of navigated living out east, and eventually we moved. And the East Coast is a bit more expensive in terms of cost of living. It came a point where my father's mental health became such that it was no longer viable for him to hold down a steady job in the way that he was. And so he was working sales and marketing for the Xerox Corporation, and just do that. And so my mother was working as a substitute teacher at the time, and was doing all that she could to find full-time employment as a teacher, and just it wasn't happening. And so we came to a point where it was either move to a place where we could find work. And so we made the trek all the way to Omaha, Nebraska, where my mother was offered a teaching position as a math teacher. And that was probably my late elementary years that we migrated from New Hampshire to Nebraska. And so from late elementary up into high school, just kind of floated around trying to figure out what my role was in life. Faith had been a small part of our family's DNA, but never really something that was intentionally sought. We church hopped for a while, and then altogether sort of gave up on that idea of church. Not so much the idea of faith, but just being in some sort of faith community. And so we fast forward several years into, I had to have been middle school. So maybe not several years, but a couple years into middle school. And I fell in love with skateboarding, as most middle schoolers seem to have done then. And so there in Omaha, Nebraska, the Salvation Army there at the time had a skate park in their gymnasium. And so on a Friday night with a couple of friends, we went skateboarding in the gym of the Salvation Army. And I think much like you, not fully aware of really all that the Salvation Army was or who they were. At that point, I just knew them as someone that had a skate park in their gym with a weird name. Like, I just thought it was an indoor skate park known as the Salvation Army. And yeah, it's like, who? Anyways.
Yeah.
And so went to go get a drink of water and noticed that there was a sign that said chapel, and had enough sort of background of kind of what chapel sort of implied that I was like, man, this has got to be a church. And so I asked my family to go on a Sunday. And we did, and we just kind of never left. And so the Salvation Army really ended up being the place that I absolutely needed in my teenage years. I needed a place where I could explore who I was in environments that were kind of used to perhaps messier people or broken people. I needed a community who wasn't going to be all too concerned with our family's dynamic, which at times was broken at best. And so the Salvation Army just became that safe place where we could explore who we were. And then we fast forward several years, and now here I am in a similar position as an officer in the Salvation Army, where we get to connect kids and adults into who God wants them to be. But the journey to get there was wild at best. 13 years old, stumbling into a skate park on a Friday, really no understanding of what it meant to have my own faith and really my own purpose in life. And then the Salvation Army just begins to sow into this teenager like it was nobody's business, and sent me to camps in Wisconsin, and had opportunities to go to Chicago. And as a kid who moved from New Hampshire to Nebraska, those were the only two states that existed to me. We knew about Iowa because it was right across the river from Omaha, but it was. The Salvation Army just afforded me opportunities to explore the world. And because of that, began to develop who I was because of that. I think I mean, if I remember my timeline correctly, it was like we were a year into being the Salvation Army as our church, and they offered us to go to Alaska for a couple of weeks to help with another Salvation Army there in this tiny little town called Cadova, Alaska. And just to see people taking a risk or a chance on really this young teenage kid that was incredibly impressionable on me, and was something that I think forever I will want opportunities like that to do the same, to be able to take kids who really would not have had an opportunity otherwise. Our family was lower middle class at best, really didn't have any direction or purpose in my life besides let's go to high school and hopefully graduate and figure it out from there. I thought the best opportunity in my life was to be a manager at a fast food restaurant forever, which, we need those people. Like, we need managers at fast food restaurants.
Yeah.
But God just had such a different direction and purpose for my life that I think stumbling into the Salvation Army allowed for him to unlock for me. And so then we move into our college years, and really it came to this head where I had to make a decision on whether or not I was truly going to believe was giving me college. And at some point, God opened the door for me to take an internship with the Salvation Army in sort of this ministry role. And then another door opened up for me to go to their seminary school in Chicago. And then I find myself here in Indiana a couple of years later, serving as an officer in the Salvation Army. And none of that journey, none of my purpose is discovered unless I, one, move to Nebraska, and then two, begin to skateboard. And so these two kind of, what at the time seemed totally disconnected, become really the linchpin for my entire life.
Yeah.
And without it, I wouldn't be here. I don't know really at all where I would be in life at all if it wasn't for kind of those two, what seemed to be at my time such insignificant moments of massive change.
Wow, Vinyl. So we're talking to Vinyl Lee, officer in the Salvation Army here in the Fountain Square area of Indianapolis, as a part of our ActivateIndy.com series of interviews. And Vinyl, I love that you connected that, because I think so often people can be like, if we're doing Jesus type stuff or whatever, like, we don't need to be skateboarding. We don't need to be doing, kid type activities. Like, let's get kids in here and it needs to be all Bible study or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. But I have to believe that, and just hearing your passion and what you're saying now, is that every day as you're engaging, youth and folks, in maybe non-traditional ways, you talked about, the computer coding and the 3D model, all the stuff you guys are doing down there, is you've got to move with such a sense of passion and just confidence that you can change someone's life by giving them a very, non-Jesus-y, if you will, like, on-ramp to relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think we sort of stand in this posture of whatever it takes. And so for us, whatever it takes is whatever vehicle it takes as well. So, I wouldn't be a Christian today. I wouldn't have any sort of faith expression today if it wasn't for skateboarding. Which is probably the least spiritual form that coming to Christ can take. And so we come into this ministry with that same sort of mindset that it wasn't a Bible study. It wasn't an invitation to church. It wasn't a traditional church sort of activity. It was this non-traditional church activity put inside of this same sort of mindset of like, whatever it takes so that people could have, so people can understand their purpose and passion in Christ, we're going to do it. And so some Salvation Army officer who probably didn't skateboard said, hey, I'm seeing a lot of people around my neighborhood skateboarding. Let's go ahead and build these ramps and see what happens. And now we have generations of people who came to know Jesus because somebody thought, hey, this might be a good opportunity to expand our ministry a little bit. And
Yeah.
I think it certainly was.
No doubt about it. Vinyl. I mean, I love that. Whatever it takes, you know what I mean? It's such an amazing posture. And I think it makes me think of, the heartbeat of God of like, as far as sending Jesus, you know what I mean? Like we got to reconcile the world back to myself, like whatever it takes. Okay. Like I'll send my son, and it's, I love that image. And so that's what brought you there. And that's you give us a little bit about what the Salvation Army is doing here in Indianapolis, specifically in the Fountains Square area. What are some ways? Because what we want to do is inspire people with your guys' mission, inspire people with your story, and then get them involved in making a difference. Invited them into opportunity to maybe meet the next Vinyl Lee, like a kid that just pops in for an after school deal, or he's into learning to code, and they could come alongside what you guys are doing, and like you said, literally change not just eternity, but also change generationally. The blessing of God upon families. And so, what are some ways people come alongside you guys and help serve in what you're doing in the Fountain Square area?
Yeah, I think so. Here in Indianapolis, the Salvation Army has multiple campuses. So there's a campus in Eagle Creek. There's a campus in Fountain Square. There's we call it the Block of Hope downtown, which is 3 sort of different homeless shelters. And then we have 2 rehab centers as well within the Indianapolis area. So one is the Harbor Light Center, and the other one we call the Adult Rehab Center. So there is, just based off of that footprint alone, the opportunities for people to connect with a Salvation Army close to them, both close in proximity, but also in passion, is very accessible. So here in Fountain Square, because this is the context that I know best, is, there are opportunities for people to connect in here in terms of service. The biggest thing that we are looking at here within this next year is people who are passionate about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and we really want to make a big push within our makerspace. It's a similar push that's happening within sort of the charter schools in and around the Fountain Square, Garfield Park, Fletcher Place neighborhoods are really leaning into that same thing, and so we think that it's a logical step for us to lean into that in the same way, but perhaps with different passion and motivation behind that. And so we are really looking for people that in this year who have some skill sets that would be perfect to complement the services of a makerspace, which really for those who aren't super familiar with what a makerspace is, it's best thought of like a craft room on steroids. And so if you can imagine it, you can make it come to life. Kim Brand, who's with First Makerspace Indy, says the first makerspace is in our head. It's our brain. And that everything that we can create within that space starts within our brain. And so we are looking for people who have this creative gene, who have perhaps a passion in fashion design. How do we take this idea of making my own clothing brand and bringing that to life? And we've got tools, we've got the infrastructure to do that. But we need people with the skill sets. We're looking to expand our coding offerings, utilizing things like Raspberry Pi, which is a literal foreign language to me. But I
thought we were talking about pie here.
We were talking about pie. I got real excited for a second. Yeah. But
I got hungry.
And so we're looking for that's right. So we're looking for people who who have these skill sets, but want to use them in a way that they can begin to transform people's lives. We know that within Indianapolis, people are especially keen, especially in this time, about the needs of seniors. And so we're always looking for people who are going to help support our senior bingo programs on Wednesday, and really begin to expand the offerings that we provide to senior citizens within the Fountain Square area. If you're passionate about athletics, we've got tons of teenagers who are incredibly passionate about basketball and soccer, and are looking for adults who are going to invest in them in a healthy way, and help teach them skills. Within this last year, within our basketball program, we saw kids who had no hope of graduating high school end up getting college scholarships because of the way that volunteers within the Salvation Army were able to come alongside, mentor, and push these kids to see that they've got a future well beyond Indianapolis. And so we're looking for people who are truly passionate about impacting and influencing the next generation to do some really amazing things.
Yeah, Vinyl, I love that. A couple of things that popped in my mind as you were talking is one of my favorite quotes that was majorly impactful in my life was when I heard Erwin McManus say that that creativity is the natural result of spirituality. And I was a musician, a drummer prior to being a pastor or anything else, and just grew up with that creative kind of spirit and drive in my life. And for a while there in my life, I thought maybe those were mutually exclusive or couldn't hang out together. And as I began to realize, like, no, the more I grow in Christ and the more my spirit comes alive, then the more creative I'll become, because I'm made in the image of the most creative being, in the universe. And so it allowed me to realize that getting involved in like what you're talking about in the maker space, and being able to the second thought I had is, one of the things I talk about in spiritual DNA is this process of beginning to bring God the good stuff of your life. And what I realized about what you guys are doing with the opportunities to serve with you, it's not, a lot of people are like, if I start serving Jesus, he's going to send me to some dangerous village, in Africa or something. It's like, no, if you have, like you're saying, you have coding and math and science skills and fashion design and like something that is your gift, that is your expression of creativity, you guys have an opportunity to take that passion, to take that creativity, to take that good skill that you have and just come alongside kids, or shoot, if you like bingo, right, to come alongside and bring a relational side of things, with senior citizens. I love that you guys have opportunities that are not scary. They're actually an opportunity for you to bring the thing you may love the most and have that expression of creativity, bring spiritual life, not only to you, but the people that you serve next to. And I love that.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, that there is perhaps an apprehension about following Christ and sort of to that next step, because we feel like it might be into something dangerous, or the unknown just really seems scary. But I think you're absolutely right. Christ is just calling us to use the things that he has given us to expand the kingdom, which is ever expanding and ever inviting. And that doesn't have to mean into something scary. Now, if people want scary opportunities, we can figure out a way to connect with that. But I think most people are just interested in using their gifts in a way that is safe and appropriate, but also helps them realize that they're connecting to something so much bigger than themselves at the end of it all.
Yeah, I like it. Hey, if you want scary, we can dial up scary for you. But I mean, Vinyl, man, I've loved getting to know your story, getting to hear a little bit more about what you guys are doing. What is the easiest way for somebody to stay connected with you and get involved in serving alongside the Salvation Army?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the easiest way to stay connected to what the Salvation Army is doing in Indianapolis, but perhaps across the whole state of Indiana, is on social media. So you can find us on Facebook, the Salvation Army Indiana Division. Our website is salvationarmyindiana.org, and those are some of just the best ways to always keeping up to date with what's happening across the Salvation Army. If they're interested specifically about Fountain Square, our Facebook is the Salvation Army Fountain Square, and our website is safountainsquare.org. But we encourage people to stay connected to the Salvation Army wherever they may find themselves.
Absolutely. Finally, I love it. And we're gonna have all those links posted on the activateindy.com website as well. And that'll be an easy way. If you are inspired, you want to be able to bring the good stuff, the creativity of your life to come alongside folks and change not only their eternity, but just change the generational quality of their life. And that's what you see in Vinyl's story. And so activateindy.com, an easy way to go, and all the links that the Vinyl has also said. So, man, Vinyl, it's a joy to get to meet you. I'd love to meet you in person sometime. I love the work you're doing here in our great city, and just the way that God has used, a childhood passion of yours to shape and to form your future. It's a beautiful story, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, look forward to meeting in person soon once everything's safe to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, man, have a great day. We appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. You too.
And we're back. Oh, man. I tell you what, that's a trip every single week, isn't it? I mean, we're talking, we're hanging out together, then all of a sudden, boom, we're talking to somebody else. They take us down some journey of awesomeness, and then we come back. I feel like sometimes maybe we just got to get a breather. I mean, skateboarding changes his life, moves from the East Coast to Nebraska, feels like life has no purpose, meaning, doesn't know what's going on, just finds out this place has a skate park. Salvation Army, what? Doesn't even know what it is. Skateboarding. He liked to skateboard. And now he has dedicated his life to serve and to see and invite other people into the love of God. And he's seeing lives being changed. And I love that fact, right? These people that ran the Salvation Army, that for Vinyl, he was just a kid. He was just a kid that these people had dedicated themselves to serving others. And they saw Vinyl, they invited him in, and they gave him opportunities, right? They gave him opportunities to delight himself in the Lord. They gave him opportunities to decide to trust himself and discover who God had created him to be. And they lived a life that he could emulate of dedicating himself to others. So beautiful. It's so beautiful. And we started this conversation today about, the most asked question, which is, what's next? And you may be listening to the podcast and you may say, you know what, Daron, I had a dream. When I was 13, I wanted to be Tony Hawk. I wanted to be a pro skateboarder. And I'm 42 and I have bad knees and I never actually learned to skate. I tried to learn to skate. I mean, like I said, everybody kind of did. I kind of had a crappy skateboard. I don't know if I can blame. It was kind of like good skateboards are kind of thin. Mine was kind of thick. It had this weird like skull on the bottom, which I thought was kind of bad at the bone, but I could never ollie. When you ollie, where you get the board to jump up. Like I think maybe in all of my years of skateboarding, and by years, I mean the probably 6 months that I tried, I think I maybe ollied twice. And I want to say that the ground clearance on my ollie was maybe 2 to 3 centimeters. I couldn't figure it out. Anyway, this isn't about skateboarding, but it is. Okay. Maybe you're at a place where you're like, you know what? I had a dream. I was going to be an author, or I was going to be a basketball star, or I was going to, own my own company. You had dreams, and maybe you look back and you go, you know what? The reality is I don't think I'm going to be able to accomplish them at the fullest extent of which I thought, and that begins to depress me or discourage me. Here's the good news, is that God isn't stuck in your present, not knowing how to take you into the future. And the thing I love about the story that Vinyl just shared with us, right, is he talks about people that like bingo or like basketball, that they're coming next to kids, right? They've dedicated themselves, right, to serving others. And they've got kids that were probably not going to graduate from high school that now are getting college scholarships. And how are they getting them? Because someone that liked to play bingo and someone that maybe liked basketball, maybe they had a dream they were going to be an NBA star, but then they realized they were only going to be 6 foot tall and they weren't that athletic. But now they can take their love for basketball, dedicate it to serving others, and actually see God begin to shape and change the life of a kid to where their journey now is going to change possibly an entire, a family tree. Maybe this kid's going to be the first kid to ever graduate, from their family. And how did it happen? It's somebody that had a passion for basketball that maybe didn't live their dreams, begins to dedicate themselves to serving others. And in the process, they realized that maybe it wasn't about them in the first place, because maybe it's not about you, but maybe the journey there is about the who. It's about finding someone to dedicate your life to serve next to, and begin to allow God to teach them to delight themselves in God, to decide to trust themselves, and to actually dedicate themselves to serving others. I know for me that I was able to taste just little bits of some of my childhood dreams. But I know now the place in my life is that I could grow my hair back out, and I can still play drums. I could probably find some, old cover band or something, or maybe like an older like country band. I could move to Nashville, and I could probably try at some point to like do the thing. And I would enjoy parts of it. But I can tell you this, is that one of the greatest joys I have found is being able to unleash and unlock the dreams of other people. And understand that as I trusted who God had created me to be and the interests that I had, and I went after those things, I was invited into a journey that actually where God was in control of, and he shaped and he developed and he brought me into a whole nother expression that was so much greater than what I even could dream. That when I could trust God with my dreams, that I could delight myself in him, I could be soft and tender towards him, he began to change what I was really, really desiring. And I can be honest, as a little kid, probably there was a lot of my dreams. It was just about me wanting what I wanted, the life that I wanted to live. And now to be able to come to a place of maturity and understanding in that, and find out that no, the best of it is when you're actually able to serve others through it. And there's great joy and fulfillment for you as well. And so, hey, you know what? I don't know. Maybe it's a Salvation Army in your town. You could look and help serve them, like find somebody awesome like Vinyl Lee. Maybe it's your local church. Maybe it's some other group. Maybe it's the kid across the street. I could tell you this, is that our world is desperate for good mentors. And you don't have to have all your stuff together. You just have to show somebody what it looks like to delight yourself in the Lord, to learn to trust him. You're at a place in your life where maybe you've learned to trust yourself a little bit and understand who God's created you to be. And then as you dedicate yourself to serve others, what you may be able to unlock in the life you may be able to change in someone around you, to be the greatest and most fulfilling thing you could ever be a part of. And that's why I love Vinyl Story. And that's why I love getting to hang out with you guys every single week here on the podcast, to hear your stories of life change and see what God is doing in your life. And it may not be skateboarding, but I guarantee you there's something that God has placed in your heart, a passion that you have had, that as you pursue it, you'll be amazed at the difference in this world that God will make through it. Hey, listen, God bless you guys. It's been a joy to be with you again here on episode 6 of the Daron Earlewine podcast. If you got questions, you got comments on what we covered today or in any episode, reach out to me, please. Would love to hear from you. You can do that on Instagram or Facebook, or you can email me. It's just Daron, Daron, at blackbirdmission.com. I want to thank everybody who reviewed and subscribed to the podcast. Once again, one of the Daron Earlewine mugs going out to Drew. Drew, thanks for the review. We appreciate it. Have a phenomenal, phenomenal week. We'll talk to you next Wednesday. And until we do, remember these 3 things. God is near you, not far from you. God is for you, not against you. And God has created you on purpose and for purpose. Have a beautiful week. We'll catch you next time right here on the Daron Earlewine Podcast.